Okay.
Yep, we're live.
Thank you very much, Neil. Well, we're well quorate, I think, by the faces that I've seen thus far. And if I could just read the normal statement. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcasts by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Would members please keep their microphones and cameras turned off unless invited to speak by the chair to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off your microphone and camera when you are finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the planning committee, and any mobile phones, iPads are switched off or on silent. Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Are there any, Neil, please?
No apologies received, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. The second item is declaration of interest. Are there any members wishing to make declarations of interest, and if so, on which matter? No? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on 3rd of March 2021. And if we take them a page at a time. Page 5 for accuracy, please. And page 6 for accuracy. Would someone then please propose that a correct record?
Yeah, correct record, Chair.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Chair.
Much obliged to you. All agreed? Thank you very much. If we then move on to your agenda, there are 3 items on the agenda, or sorry, 4. There's a statement, a publication of the Future Wales Planning Act, which we will receive a report on at the end of the actual planning schedule. So the first item on the agenda, item 1, is on pages 15 to 24 of your paperwork. The application number is 19-0124. The site is 94 and 96 Alterine Avenue, Newport. The ward is Alterine. The ward members are Councillor Matthew Evans, David Fairweather and Charles Ferris. The presenting officer is Stephen Williams. I've not been informed of any public speakers, and the issue was called to committee by Councillor Ferris. So if Steve Williams, if you could do the introduction, please. Thank you very much.
Steve,
All right. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, I'll just bring the presentation up. Okay, can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah,
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, the site comprises the rear gardens of 2 detached dwellings in Alterine Avenue. Number 94 Alterine Avenue, which is the property on the right-hand side, and number 96 on the left-hand side. There's a rear lane to the rear that's known as Alterine View. And the application has been called to committee by Councillor Ferris. So this is an aerial view of the site, which is these rear gardens here. And you can see that Alterine Avenue is to the south and Alterine View is to the north. There's open space and woodland to the north of the site, and to the east of the site are properties in Alterine View that face on to the lane. All-terrain view starts at the turning off at All-terrain Avenue, close to the cafe. It's a one-way lane. It's single carriageway, and traffic is allowed to travel from a southwest direction to the northeast. It is a through road, and it ultimately feeds onto All-terrain Road and Barrack Hill to the north. This is the existing block plan of the site. So you can see number 94, 96 facing onto All-terrain Avenue, and you can see the location of number 57 All-terrain View adjacent to the site. It's an outline planning application, so all matters are reserved except for access. It's proposed. We've got an indicative layout which shows 2 detached dwellings. So the gardens will be subdivided, providing 1.8 metre high fencing between the proposed dwellings and the existing properties. The rear garden of the proposed dwellings would have a depth of 10.5 metres. The residential properties would have a height range of between 3 and 7.5 metres in height. There is a level difference, so excavation would be required adjacent to All-terrain View to provide for garages and for a turning off area. There's a red brick wall 3 metres high to the rear of number 96 All-terrain Avenue, which would be demolished, and it's proposed to create 1 vehicular access in this position here, and a pedestrian access in this position there. And it's also proposed to upgrade an existing road hump to provide a raised table access crossing. So that's on the site itself, looking back at the properties in All-terrain Avenue, the host dwellings. And then that's looking at the side elevation of number 57 All-terrain View. And that's looking then towards the area where the proposed dwellings are would be built. So in terms of this is All-terrain View, just to get your bearings in terms of where the site actually is. So this is number 57 All-terrain View. And the application site would start where these 2 walls meet here, and the boundary is demarcated by this hedgerow. So the site starts here and includes this land further on. That's just looking back at number 57 All-terrain View. So this red brick wall here is to the rear of number 96, and this would be demolished. And then that's just looking back in the other direction. So this wall would come down. So in terms of the issues, if I go back to the indicative drawing. So in terms of residential amenity, I say these are just indicative drawings, but they do show that sufficient garden could be provided for both the proposed and the existing properties, and suitable privacy distances could also be provided with a minimum of 21 metres between the proposed dwellings and the existing properties. And given the height of the proposed dwellings at 7.5 metres and the fact that they're set off the boundaries, it's not considered that these dwellings would have any overbearing impact on neighbours. In terms of highway safety, let's say this lane here is one way, so the key visibility is in this direction here to the west, and this area here would be excavated, and this wall would be demolished to create that visibility. So there's two dimensions that to be aware of. There's the X dimension, which is the setback. Trying to get the, bear with me. There's the setback from the road into the site is called the X distance, and then the Y distance is from the that point to where it meets the highway. So in other words, this is the stopping site distance. Now the lane is 30 miles per hour in speed, so the normal distances would be, the X would need to be 2.4 meters and the Y would need to be 43 meters. But this is not possible, even with the demolition and excavation as proposed. This isn't possible without crossing land on the property of number 98. What can be achieved is a distance of 2 meters by 35 meters. So obviously that's below the necessary dimensions for a 30 mile per hour zone. So the only way to sort of justify this would be to submit a speed survey, which is what they've done. And what that's shown is that the 85th percentile speeds are 25.9 miles per hour. Now, according to a national policy document called Manual for Streets, at 25 miles per hour, the stop in sight distance should be 33 meters. So at this speed, the Y distance is acceptable, and in fact exceeds that Manual for Speeds requirement by 2 meters. Now, Manual for Streets also states that a setback of 2 meters may be considered in some slow speed situations, and in this case highways don't object to that reduced X distance, and they've removed their objection and is now supporting the application. A pedestrian access with a 2 meter by 2 meter visibility display is also provided, which highways are happy with. In terms of design, design is reserved, so we don't have any elevation drawings to show you. That's something that would be considered as part of any future reserved matters application. But in terms of visual amenity, the proposed dwellings do follow the pattern of development in Altarine View, very much aligned with number 57 Altarine View there. So the proposal is considered to have an acceptable impact on the character of the area. In terms of sort of affordable housing contributions, that would be something they would have to contribute to, and the applicant has agreed to enter into a legal agreement to deal with affordable housing. So in conclusion, we're recommending that the application be granted with conditions, subject to a Section 106 agreement and subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Councillor Charles Ferris, it's your ward. Protocol is that you speak first, if you so wish.
Yeah. Could I ask a few questions first, please, Chair, to Mr. Williams?
By all means.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. We're going really for a shared vehicle access to this development, aren't we, between the two properties?
That's correct.
We don't normally like shared vehicle access, do we? Seeing it sort of causes potential friction between future occupants.
I think you're probably referring to what we would call a tandem shared access, where one property is behind the other, and that can cause disturbance with sort of vehicles driving down the side of an existing property. and there being potential conflict because they're in a tandem arrangement. But here we haven't got that. As I say, to have a shared access where in this sort of arrangement is not something that would be a problem in our opinion.
Even though it's termed as a tandem garage arrangement, yes?
Well, this isn't tandem, you see. I mean, what a tandem arrangement would be, for instance, is if they were looking to get access up this driveway and you'd have to a dwelling here. That would be tandem, because you'd be having vehicles drive up the side of this property and potentially vehicles wanting to leave this property sort of having conflict here. That would be an example of a tandem arrangement, whereas one is behind the other. But because they've got access off Alderine View here, these two properties, and these two properties retain their access from Alderine Avenue, you don't get that tandem arrangement. So this is acceptable.
Now, the traffic humps that are going to be sort of reutilised, they're very old traffic humps, aren't they, along that stretch of road? And I wonder, are they still officially recognised as traffic humps? They haven't been anything done to them in all their history. They're just the same sort of pile of raised asphalt that one sees and seems to be abandoned nowadays. Am I right in thinking that they're not officially recognised as viable, maintained humps?
Right, that's quite a technical question for the highways officer, I think.
Okay, so it's envisaged that one of these is going to be sort of reutilised as a pathway, a pedestrian crossing.
No, there's no pedestrian crossing proposed. What's proposed is there's a road hump, existing road hump that's directly to the rear of number 94. Yeah. But it's proposed to upgrade that to a table. So that is being upgraded. Those are the only off-site works that are proposed.
Could we please look at one of the photographs again, looking up the lane from where these houses are, or proposed houses are?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, that's the one. Well, I'm going to launch into my great epic speech now, but I just wanted people to see that picture. As you can see, it's a country lane. You know, there's very little space. You could, you know, if somebody was walking along it and a vehicle came along, the pedestrian would have to step into the hedge, or as best they could, to let vehicles pass. There's no way you could ever entertain two vehicles being on that face on, and hence the fact it's one way. But my big reservation, of course, is the safety of it all, because on the other side of the bank to your right, there is this very steep slope, and if it was a few degrees steeper, you wouldn't call it a slope, you'd call it a cliff. And I think that it's really unsafe in many ways to introduce more traffic onto that road. And so that's one of my objections. My other objection, of course, is that sadly we've seen the erosion of a lot of the green space up around Ridgeway. Every opportunity, given the fact it's a very desirable place to live, has been exploited. We've seen 3 large houses being put onto a space where there was just 2 prefabs before on the corner, and little bit by little bit, the green and pleasant attitude of Ridgeway is being subverted, and the area, in my opinion, is becoming overdeveloped. So that was one of my other reservations about the scheme, and I also wonder really the sincerity of it all. Are they going to build, or are they just looking for a short-term planning gain if they hope to sell the properties on? Because it does seem very nebulous what's being proposed, and for various reasons, not least the traffic safety along that little country lane is the reason why I'd ask people to vote against today. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ferris. I'd like to point out, as chair, in the interest of consideration of all that's before us, the highways are happy with the application. You know, I think you accept that, Charles, do you?
I accept that the highways are happy with it, but knowing the lane as we do and how tight it is, I think the introduction of more traffic onto that lane is a bad idea.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. You've stated your view. Rest of the committee, please. Oh, Councillor Jason Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with what Charles is saying there. Is he using this idea that maybe for extra gain to sell his property? I would have preferred if they were sent pictures or drawings in of the two new dwellings which are going to be on that site itself. Also, it does conflict with number 57 with the two side view areas of the windows on the side of what distance they got between them and the next dwelling on that property. I would ask for a site visit on this, but I'm not quite sure where we stand with this regarding the COVID restrictions as well. I don't know, because if that's just a one-way lane, which it is, I know I use quite regularly sometimes as well to get it to other parts of Alterinne. It can be very tight, and many people actually use that road as well to get down there. How long will the road be closed off for? Because they need to actually close part of that road off to excavate and get trucks in and out of that area to actually build on it. But I am a bit reserved. I would like to see more pictures of the dwellings of what's going to be actually go there, I think.
Thank you, Jason. Councillor Richard White.
Thank you, Chair. My concerns were almost the same as Jason's. The side windows in number 57, the first proposed house is right within close distance of that, and also I could see that Alterinne view would have to be closed when that wall and the piece of garden next to 57 was being excavated to allow vehicles to get off the road. And I'm wondering how concerned highways are with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor White. Councillor William Roatley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question. Why are we introducing a speed reduction sort of table to replace the existing speed hump? So why are we doing that? Okay, well, we've got Highway Officer present, Anna Griffiths. Do you wish to come in at this stage, Anna, please?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
I've made notes addressing some of the points that have been raised. The first one regarding the joint access, which you were talking about. From a highways point of view, the joint access is always preferred to a single access, as junctions are the main areas for causing accidents. So a single access is likely to reduce accidents rather than providing accesses for individual properties. The condition of the speed humps that was raised is really a matter for highway maintenance and isn't really a planning issue, although regarding their effectiveness, they clearly are effective, as the applicant has provided a speed survey which shows that speeds are reduced to 25.9 miles per hour. It could be, you'd have to ask Stephen Williams, but we could put provision in a 106 to upgrade them, which might be considered acceptable. The speed table at the access is really going to replace an existing speed hump, which it's going to be an improvement. As the councillor has previously said, they are in bad condition. This one will provide definite slowing down, and it will help with access and egress from the property with regards to vehicles negotiating the speed hump, and it will help with the visibility as well. regarding demolishing and site works, this would have to be controlled by a CEMP, a Construction Environmental Management Plan, which could be conditioned. The likelihood that, I do agree though, that that road would have to probably be closed for some period, although this would have to be raised at a later date. I can't really comment on that without seeing their proposals. Is there any other questions? I'm happy to answer.
Okay, Anna, thank you very much for that contribution. Tracy, Councillor Tracy Olio, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few concerns as well. One on the drawings, it wasn't quite clear whether it's back-to-back tandem or side-to-side tandem. There's still tandem, and you've still got to pass one property to get to the other. Now, if there's two people in that dwelling with cars, you know, how is that going to pass, and where are they going to park outside this lane? Because I can't see a family member walking down a dark lane with shopping bags to actually get in with two cars. So that would be a concern. But also, is there's no turning point inside, is there, for one vehicle of house one to turn to be able to get, because obviously, because it's one way, are you reversing into the driveway, are you driving in, and is there a turning point for that? And that would be another concern of mine. Also, I want to question as well. I know there's S106 funding can be put in, but them neighbouring properties, if the build is given the okay, then, you know, we all know as new builds go up, the muck, it is just everywhere. I'd like to see some of them neighbours compensated, actually, you know, one for cleaning of their properties, because as you know, they can be, you know, you can be dealing with horrendous muck and dirt once them builds starts progressing. So just them questions really on the parking areas, the turning points inside that driveway. That's for me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Olio. Could we call Stephen back in at the end, perhaps? Councillor Jordan, you wish to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question over there. We're on that picture there. We got like 91.5 meters there. Is that where the original wall is, and they taking that down? Because if you've looked on the properties previous, number 57 and below, they've come away from the drive. You know, they've dug themselves back in from the property. But is that wall sort of going to stay there?
Sorry, which wall are you talking about again?
If you go back to the this photograph, looking up the road where you said where number 57 is. Yeah, that one there, that bit of wall, like you said there, where the wall is, and the trees where the boundary is there. Is that all coming down? That's all coming away, is it? Yeah.
Yes. All this land is being excavated, and this brick wall is coming down as well.
So really, they're looking at that the width from the road, from the one edge of the road to where the garage is. That's what it'll be like further up then on those two properties.
Yeah, if I go back to the block plan, so there will be a low wall here, which is similar to what's there at the moment. Then you'd have the access, and then you'd have a low wall again, literally 600 mil high here, in place of what is currently a 3 meter high wall. So these here and there are triple garages, and cars would drive down and drive in, and you've got a depth from the lane to well, to where the bank or the garage starts of 5.5 meters, which complies with our requirements in terms of what sort of setback you need to have. So cars would drive in and park in their respective garages, and then obviously this property here would have sufficient room to turn here within the shared driveway, and there's a turning head here for the property that would be parking in this garage.
So why is the best idea is just take the whole wall away completely and have it all open? That means you are then taking all that away, really, so they can actually park. They can actually drive straight into their garage.
I think what we need to do is control where the access point is, because at this point we've judged that the visibility display is sufficient for people who are driving out of here to be able to see cars coming down the lane, and equally for cars coming down the lane to see cars edging out. So if you didn't have a wall here, there would be nothing to somebody to stop this person to just simply drive out, and that would be dangerous. They need to be driving out in this position here.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Do you want to answer the questions raised by Councillor Alio while you're on about turning points? I think you've just touched on it, to be honest. And
yeah, I think probably that covers the turning area question. In terms of the question on compensation, that's not something that we would we sort of offer up for residents. We couldn't require the applicant to provide compensation. That's what we can do is put a planning condition on, which is suggested in the report, for a construction and environmental management plan, which would sort of detail how the works would proceed in a manner that is safe for users of the highway. And there was a question on whether the existing humps in the lane could be upgraded as part of the Section 106 agreement. That's not something that the highways engineer has asked us to go back to the applicant on. So we've not asked the applicant for that. There could be an argument that it's reasonable, it's related to the development, and potentially, I don't know where they're positioned, but you could possibly sort of justify that it's necessary. But we've not asked the applicant to do whether they're willing to do that. It's only this one that we've asked and they've agreed to.
okay, thank you, Stephen. Councillor Trevor Watkins, thanks for your patience. You're next.
I got plenty of that, Chair. Two questions, really. Can Stephen tell me which way the traffic flow goes from that diagram, please?
Yeah, so Alderine View is a one-way road.
Yeah.
So on this diagram, it travels from the left to the right.
That's from there to, no, the other way, that way, from the right to the left, you say?
No, from the left to the right.
So turning into the property would be okay. I've got no problem with that. What concerns me is the exit. Vehicles exiting that property have to turn to the right to go out along the lane. Am I correct?
That's correct.
If you can go back to the plan now, where it shows the boundary wall and the hedge, and how narrow that lane is, because those boundary walls are going to remain. Is there enough, the vehicle has to protrude halfway out of that onto the highway before it can actually start turning. So I'm concerned how narrow that lane is and whether the vehicle, whatever vehicle it is, turns right to proceed along the one-way system.
Yeah, we don't have a concern about, the turning circle. In terms of the ability of the vehicle exiting to be able to turn into the road, that's not something that's a concern. I'm sure Anna would agree with that.
Okay, the other question is also for highways, so perhaps the lady can answer the both things. If the traffic survey came back at 30 miles an hour, would highways object to the development?
Okay, the answer to that is yes, we would object because the visibility required would be 43 metres and that's not achievable in this location. The other question about vehicles exiting the site is they are providing a 4.5 metre wide exit, so some turning can occur within the site,
Right.
and the turning circles in this location are acceptable.
Okay, I'm happy with that. What concerns me now also is the 30 mile an hour. Okay, they've done a survey at 25 point whatever it is, but it's still a 30 mile an hour highway or road, whichever you'd like to call it, and there's no guarantee that everybody is going to stick to a 25 mile per hour. And that's the reason that I am going to recommend refusal.
Councillor, may I just add that
Yeah.
if traffic calming restrictions are provided every 60 metres, then speeds will be reduced to 20 miles an hour, just for that vehicles have to slow on the approach to the, in this case, raised table or speed hump, and they don't have enough distance to accelerate to gain that speed.
So where is the next speed restriction?
That is just up the road. It's about 60 metres, but I don't have an exact distance.
Well, that's debatable on whether people go that fast or not. I'm aware that some people do, but there are. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you, Anna. Councillor Charles Ferris, you're indicating again?
Yes, I'd like to ask if we could keep that picture there. Basically, I'd like to just reinforce things with Steve, if we could. So it's proposed that this, what looks like a dry stone wall coming out at an angle, that will go, but it will be replaced by another wall in the same position. Yes.
That's my understanding, but it's going to be very similar.
Yeah.
That's effectively what the arrangement is. It's going to be 600 mil in height. In other words, it's not going to be of a height that would obscure your view if you're sitting down in a car.
Yeah, and then of course we move on to the big 9-foot brick wall. That's going to go, and that's where the improved hump will be, allowing access excuse me, into the garages. But effectively, the point I wanted to make is that the footprint of the buildings and the ground is as it is appears in that photograph. So there's not really any difference in the narrowness of the lane and how much the property space protrudes onto the lane. I'm right in thinking we see it more or less as it is, but it would be of a different sort of construction.
Yeah, the visibility display is, as I say, there's an X distance and a Y distance. So yeah. The X distance is from the lane into the site.
Yeah.
And then it allows visibility along the road, which is the Y distance. The X distance caters for the bonnet. Mm-hmm. All right. So in other words, it allows a vehicle to edge up to the road. Now we do normally require a 2.4 metre distance, an X distance. In this case, it's a 2 metre distance, so slightly less. Mm. But because of the speed of the lane and the fact we've got a road hump here, or will be an upgraded road hump which will slow vehicles down. We've got the speed survey. According to Manover Streets, we can consider a reduced distance of 2 metres. So that's what we are going with in this case. Is there's a 2 metre distance for that bonnet before, you know, so it allows that visibility.
But the width
up the lane.
But the width of the road and the sort of footprint of the properties is as it is. There's no sort of improvement. There's no improvement in width on that carriageway.
No. The replacement boundary treatment would be very much aligned with the current
So it's still, you still get the chicane effect really of that boundary wall coming out at 40 degrees.
Yes, the width of the lane doesn't increase.
No, no. Of course, pardon me, you know I've got to get a bit of history in. This is part of the old Roman road that connected Killeen to Cardiff. And if you continue on, it then links into what is Glaslook Lane. And of course, we had terrible trouble in Glaslook Lane with pedestrians walking down the lane. Now they're lucky there because they can nip into the driveways of adjacent properties, so vehicles can pass and people have got somewhere to go, admittedly in the driveways of the houses there, but here we haven't got that. There is no way for pedestrians to get out of the way of traffic coming down. They've got to go right into the hedge. And I really am quite surprised nobody's made any reference to what's on the other side of that hedge. It's one hell of a sheer drop. And given if you had an icy road, one thing and another, I just maintain I don't think it's safe.
Okay, Councillor Ferris, thank you very much. I'm sure the Romans organised something when their chariots came down that road.
No doubt you get out of the way quicker, out of those very quickly, I'm sure.
Pedestrians. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a query in regards to the speed monitoring which was done. That was done, I assume, by the developer. Did Highways confirm that in regards to, have they done a speed survey down that lane?
Anna Griffiths, please.
No, the speed survey was undertaken by a consultant. The findings are in a standard and acceptable format. And as far as I'm aware, Newport City Council don't have the facilities or the staff to carry out speed surveys with relation to individual planning applications.
Okay, thank you, Hannah.
Thank you very much. Right, I've got no other councillor indicating they wish to speak. Does somebody wish to move to a vote of some sort, please?
Yeah, Chair, I'm under the impression I would like to refuse the application, please.
It's been proposed that this outline application is refused. Is that a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Chair, can we
Sorry.
have reasons for the proposal to refuse by Councillor Jordan, please?
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Yeah, I think one of the narrowness of the lane. Two, I think the developers actually maybe using it for gain of to sell a property with a planning permission added to the sale of the property. I think on that one, and I don't like the way the access is for the properties as well.
I think your second reason, councillor, planning gain, is sort of outside of the remit that we discussed. But what about, right, so it's been proposed and seconded. Councillor Guy, I do apologise, you're indicating you wish to speak.
Only that I was going to propose the other way, in actual fact. So I'm not sure how you want to deal with this. Have to deal with the first one, I suppose, will you? Or?
Yeah, it's been proposed and seconded that we reject the application. So obviously, if you agree with the application, you vote against that recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Tracy Brooks, if you want to come in.
Yeah, so just to clarify, you're totally correct there, Chair. With the planning gain suggestion isn't a planning reason for refusal, so we would need to go on the highway access concerns. So if members can just bear that in mind when they're making their vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Chair, can I add something to that, please, in regards to the objection?
Yes, Councillor Watkins.
I'm concerned about the speed of the lane. It's a 30-mile-an-hour speed, and I don't think it's sufficient in regards to the survey is good enough, because there's no guarantee that everybody's going to travel along there 25 miles an hour.
Did you wish to comment on that, Councillor Williams, or Stephen Williams? God forbid he became a councillor, he said.
Well, the Planning Inspectorate are always telling us that it's important to have evidence for any reason for refusal. So the applicant has obviously put forward evidence in the form of a speed survey, and the highways engineer has accepted the findings of that speed survey. So for committee to refuse the application on speed grounds without any contrary evidence, I think would be very, very difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair, can I come back in as well on that then? Can I also make a refusal as well then for not supplying with sufficient drawings of the dwellings as well to go on top of that as well, because that's maybe another a factor of the discrepancy with the number of property 57 as well.
Can I just come back on that as well, Chair?
Yes.
As I say, it's an outline plan application, so they've not provided any elevational details. They have provided us with scale information, so the width, the length and the height. And they're entitled to do that. You're entitled to put an outline application in. We can't insist on having full elevational details. We simply can't at this stage.
Okay, well, I mean, the committee have been well advised this morning. Do you wish to move to the vote? Yeah. Okay, Neil, could you organise a vote for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rightly, please.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris.
Against.
Councillor White.
Unfortunately, 4, because I can't see any planning reason for refusing it.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Just to confirm here, we're voting now for Jason's proposal, which was for this to be rejected. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm against it then. So yeah, I just wanted to confirm to the other councillors I'm against it. So yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, if that's the case, my vote is against, Chair.
Oh, well, we need to retake the vote, Chair.
Yeah, I didn't want to
think we've all I do apologise, Chair. I'm in the same boat as other people.
Okay.
Yeah, Bill, I just wanted to confirm that because it wasn't quite going how everyone was speaking. So
Thank you for that.
Okay, well, let me re-establish some order then.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, we've heard the case that's been presented, and the officer's recommendation is that this application be granted with conditions subject to a section 106 legal agreement with delegated powers to refuse permission should the agreement not be signed within 4 months of a resolution to grant permission. That was the recommendation before you. It's been proposed and seconded that we reject that recommendation, and then reasons have been given which have been sort of contradicted, if you like, by officers, but the narrowness of the lane, planning gain, access, and the speed limit in the lane is 30 miles per hour. Those are the reasons that are being put forward why we should reject the officer's recommendation. Is everybody clear now on that? Please. Yeah?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so if we we move to the vote, and Neil, if you could start again.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Rightly, please.
I reject the officer's recommendation.
So you're for the amendment, so to speak, which is before
the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
For the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris.
Pardon me, I'm confused here. I don't want this thing to go through, so I've got to say I'm for, have I?
Yeah.
All right, then I'm for if that's the case. Right.
Thank you. Councillor White.
I'm against because I can't see genuine planning reasons.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Same reason as Councillor White, against.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Hollyoak.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Against.
Thank you. And yourself, please, Chair.
Against.
So that's 4 and 5 against.
Okay. Do we now revert to the officer's recommendation and have a vote on that, or is that sufficient?
Chair, for the minutes, I think we need the officer's recommendation to be proposed and voted on.
As a substantive, so to speak. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Does everybody understand that now? We've had our democratic say on this application, but we need to formalise our position, and it is now that we really agree with the officer's recommendation. So Neil, could you go through the process again, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brightly, please.
For.
Councillor Watkins.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris.
Against, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Or
Councillor Clark.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, against.
Thank you. Councillor Hollyoak.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
For.
Thank you. And yourself, please, Chair.
For.
Thank you. So that's 6 for and 3 against, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So the officer's recommendation is carried. Okay, if we could then move to item 2 on the agenda, on your agenda. It's pages 25 to 36 of your paperwork. It's application number 20-1119. The site is land west of it, 182 Cardiff Road, Newport. The ward is the Gare. The ward councillors, Debbie Wilcox, Stephen Marshall and Mark Whitcutt. And the presenting officer is, the item has been called to committee by councillors Marshall and Whitcutt. And the presenting officer is Stephen Williams again. So over to you, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Just to double check.
Yes.
Great. Okay, the application relates to the garden or part of the garden of number 182 Cardiff Road. It's proposed to construct a terrace of 5 affordable homes on the site, and the application has been called to committee by councillors Marshall and Whitcutt. So you can see the site here. It's the side garden of this property, and Cardiff Road running to the east, and then to the west is the road known as Garevale, and then to the south there's a railway embankment and a railway. This is the application property, and the side garden is here. So this is where these residential properties would be built. Let's say this is Cardiff Road, and you can see that there's a footpath that runs to the south of the site, which is accessed here next to this kiosk. And you can just see the railway there and the bridge in the background. And this is taken from Garevale. So the site is behind this hedge here. This is number 182 Cardiff Road, and you can see the footpath that comes up sort of to the south and then to the west of the site. And the site is behind this brick wall in here. Bit of a close-up on it. So you've got the number 182 Cardiff Road here, the front elevation of it, and this is where the houses are proposed. That's just looking at the side elevation of 182 Cardiff Road, and you notice that their side extension does have a side window. say this wall is to be demolished. Just looking down the gardens of the properties in Cardiff Road there. And this is the kiosk you saw earlier, so you can see the footpath. And looking down in the other direction. Now, there is planning history on this site. Back in the latter part of last year, we granted planning permission for 3 homes in a terrace on a similar position. That was the elevation of that. So that was granted planning permission back in November, but they've come back and want to increase the number of units to 5. So you can see the layout here. The wall adjacent to Gerville would be demolished as far as this point here, and then that section of wall will be reduced in height to 4.5 metres. You can see that a parking forecourt and an access will be created onto Gerville, and 182 Cardiff Road would retain its existing access off Cardiff Road there. So they'd have separate access points. There's 10 parking spaces in total, and then the terrace would have a rear garden. And there would be pedestrian access points from their rear garden onto the public footpath. Let's just focus in on the visibility display that's proposed. So again, it's a 2 metre setback. The X distance is 2 metres, and the visibility display is, let me just bring that up. So Gerville has got a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, and as you'll probably recall from the last application, that requires visibility displays of 2.4 metres by 43 metres. However, the applicant has again submitted a speed survey. And in this case, it shows that the 85th percentile speed is 25.6 miles per hour. This reduces the requirements down to 2.4 metres, X distance to 33 metres, as required by manual for streets. Now, the displays that they can provide is 2 metres by 32.5 metres in the west, so southwest direction, which is literally a half a metre shy of the 33 metres required. And in the north direction is 2 metres by 37.8 metres. So in the north direction, or the northeast direction, which is to the right-hand side, that exceeds the requirement. Now again, as I mentioned on the previous application, manual for streets states that an X distance of 2 metres can be considered in some situations, and because Gerville is a straight road, and in the context of the previous application where we've permitted 3 properties to have access onto this road, we're recommending that the application be approved. 2 spaces per property are proposed, and this accords with the parking standards. There is no visitor space, but we feel that there's adequate road parking within the vicinity to cater for this. Another issue that we've had to consider is noise. Noise from road traffic on Cardiff Road and from the railway, which is 32 metres to the south. Now, a noise assessment has been submitted, and this was submitted with the previous application as well. And it concluded that road noise is the main source of noise. So it's proposed to construct an acoustic fence along the boundary, which you can see here. And the assessment also makes recommendations about the building fabric. So in other words, the building will have to be constructed to certain standards in terms of the walls and the roof structure and windows as well. So there's requirements there, and those requirements are conditioned in our report. Environmental Health did ask for further noise surveys because they picked up that there were no actual train movements during the actual survey. However, Environmental Health made no such request on the previous application when we had the same survey in. And in the context of the fact that obviously we've approved that previous application and that we know that there's only one train per hour on that railway because it's a freight line rather than you know, a passenger line, we are proposing that to accept the recommendations of the noise assessment. In terms of residential amenity, the rear gardens we feel provide an adequate level of amenity. There is a window in this side elevation of the extension number 182, but we don't feel that that has an unacceptable impact, given that there is also windows to the front and the rear as well. So we don't think that would have an overbearing impact on that property. And in terms of sort of overlooking, as I say, the properties are very much looking down onto the parking forecourt rather than looking down onto the rear amenity space of number 182. In terms of design, very simple design, which we think is in keeping with the area. Just some floor layouts there. So there's quite small properties, affordable homes. It's kitchen, lounge on the ground floor, and then 2 bedrooms. Each property would have 2 bedrooms. They're proposing, as I say, it's proposing affordable housing, which is exempt from leisure and educational obligations, but a legal agreement is required to cover the event that any units are sold or rented privately in the future. So we're recommending plan permission be granted, subject to a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the notes and the documentation we've been given, 5.8.2 and 5.8.3, the head of law and regulation, just quoting, at this stage I cannot accept this assessment as being representative and would need to be revised and resubmitted to the local authority for consideration. Just Stephen, what's your views on that?
Yeah, that's the comments of the environmental health officer. So as I say, what they were worried about is that when they looked at the noise assessment on this application, it didn't show that there had been any train movements whilst the survey was undertaken. So they were fearful that the survey wasn't representative of a situation of when the train passes by, and therefore, you know, any mitigation measures may not cater for that scenario. So that's their concern. But there was a previous application last year which we've approved for 3 dwellings on the site. And Environmental Health never picked up on that at the time. It wasn't raised during the course of that application. So we approved the application, but subject to obviously having measures to deal with road noise. So in the context of that previous decision, but also the fact that we know that there's only 1 train every hour on that track, because it's a freight line rather than you know, a passenger line that's got regular movements. We feel it's now unreasonable to go back and ask for that noise survey to be updated. That's the approach that's been taken on that.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Clark, are you happy with that explanation?
Yep, happy. Yep, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Councillor Richard White.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of queries. What is the finish along the public footpath at the rear of the properties? Is that wall and hedge to remain? Parking for 182. Where will that be provided? Because I noticed the garage that he's got in his big garden is going to go. And also, bearing in mind what was said on the previous application, because the Gare Vale is 30-mile-an-hour road and there's reduced visibility, are there speed bumps on Gare Vale, or is it considered necessary for speed bumps to be put in on Gare Vale? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor White.
Okay, well, I'll just bring up the photographs. I don't think there's any speed bumps on Gare Vale. No, it doesn't look like there's any speed bumps. I say the view that's been taken on that is that the distances that can be achieved, the visibility distances that can be achieved, while in terms of the Y distance, in other words, the distance from the access sort of to the point in the road where you can see vehicles come in the direction coming towards us in this photograph, it's literally shy by half a metre. So it's a negligible it's a negligible amount that it's failing by. And in the north, sort of in the other direction, looking away from us, it exceeds it by quite some margin. So we think, on balance, the Y distance is acceptable. The X distance, as I say, we would normally require 2.4. They can only achieve 2. So again, it's a slight substandard in terms of the X distance setback. But again, Manual for Streets does sort of allow us to consider for that reduction to a 2 metre, where we consider that the road may be relatively quiet, may be relatively straight, and speeds are particularly low. And the speed survey has shown that those speeds are quite low. They're around about 25 miles per hour. So I think on balance, we think that the access and the visibility is just about acceptable. Trying to recall what your other queries were now, sorry.
It was parking for 182 after the garden is developed, and the boundary treatment along the public footpath at the rear of the properties.
Right, okay. So say the access 282 will be maintained. Isn't to be blocked off or anything, and the driveway distance is sufficient to allow for. Just bring up the plan. Here we go. So the parking area is to remain, and you can see the parking in here. All right, so obviously the site is to be divided. At the moment, they've got a garage up here, a very long driveway, but that is to be retained, which provides sufficient room for cars to park and to turn.
Okay.
And yeah, in terms of I think on the rear here, there's a wall at the moment, but I think this may be being replaced by fence. I'd have to check the report. Sorry, I haven't got the report to hand. Bear with me a minute.
It might be in 721. I just noticed it says the existing wall to be retained.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Thank you, Councillor White. You've answered your own question.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
You've won the prize. You've won the monthly prize for the most awkward question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One is a query, really. The railway line at the back of the property, there's passenger trains go along there from Abervale to Cardiff, as well as good trains. The other thing is the amenity space on house number 1. That's the only one that complies with our SPG. All the rest are reduced. So are we making a precedent now in regards to amenity spaces for dwellings?
Yeah, you are right. The amenity space number 1 is the only property that actually fully complies with our supplementary planning guidance. Obviously, the supplementary planning guidance is guidance. It's not a code. It's not a stipulation that has to be complied with, black and white. It's guidance to give both officers and members and developers an idea of where we'd like to be. I think what you have to ask yourself a question. If the development doesn't fully comply with policy, is okay, what's the harm? And you have to be able to demonstrate harm as well as demonstrate something's contrary to policy. And I think in this case, the size of the gardens are not, I think they're of a sufficient size for people to be able to wash their clothes and sit out and have a meaningful area of space. I don't think we could really justify refusing the application based on the size of these gardens. In terms of your question, your query on the railway, well, that information I've not been provided. According to the officer report, it's a freight line, and let's say the trains pass every hour. That's what the report has said. I assume the case officers investigated that.
One further question, Steve, and that is, how much less amenity space do the other 4 houses have compared with house number 1?
Unless it's in the report, I haven't got that figure. I haven't got a precise sort of meterage that I can give you, but it's it's there in front of you. You can see what, in terms of these are a standard car parking space. You've got the scale there to sort of show you what those gardens depths have got. My estimate, that would be probably about 8 meters in depth.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor John Guy and then Councillor Jason Jordan.
Steve, the question asked by Trevor Watkins was about the trains. Obviously, the freight trains, they go down to Newport docks. I'm not absolutely sure if there's a branch before that, but anyway, in respect of the trains that come from the Western Valley, then down to Cardiff. But it was a question I was going to ask you really, but I'm trying to, get the geography of it. Certainly it's the freight trains that go down to Newport docks, but as to the other one, I'm not sure where it branches off. But Trevor probably knows better than me, does he? No. Okay.
Yes, that is correct, John. There are passenger trains going that way. The freight lines going to Newport go the other way. It branches off and goes at the back of the Gare, under the Gare and into the Newport town centre, and that's where they're proposing the new passenger trains going into Newport.
Right.
That's the part that needs upgrading for passenger trains, but the passenger trains which are running from Ebervale to Cardiff go along and over the Cardiff Road Bridge and then round the back of Maze Glass.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, we've had the Romans in Aldereen and British Rail in the Gare, so we're doing well today. Councillor Jason Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. All you want now is the Indians there with the cowboys.
They'll be coming soon,
Stuart, on the sides of the wall at the back where they said that they're going to retain it, is that mean it's going to be a slope of a drive down into that area with the cars and the parking area is at all?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't quite follow that.
Yeah, where the wall is at the back, you said they're taking the wall. The wall is being taken down.
Right.
Now, there seems to be a bit of a difference to the height. If we look from Gare Vale of the pictures, looking down onto the property, it looks like the wall is smaller up on top than the bottom. And if we look in the garden towards the wall,
I'm sorry. I'm still not quite following your question.
If we go to the picture of the garden and looking where the development is, and you've got the back wall. That wall there, see that back wall there? It seems quite high. What's the difference in the height from there to the top of that? And if we look at Gare Vale, it don't seem that high from that side to that side. Is it a bit of a slope which the cars will actually go down? It's just going to be a bit of a ramp towards the properties. Do you see what I mean here? See the size of the wall there?
Yeah, I don't.
Is it going to be like it's going to be like a sort of an incline up to get out of from those properties? I mean,
there may be. I must admit, I don't know for sure. I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking with that sort of like maybe more of a judgment trying to get out of there then as well, from the property as well.
It's difficult to tell from these photos. Yeah, I haven't come across information that sort of told me that there's a difference in levels. I'd have to investigate that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because it just looks like it would be a bit of a sort of a slope going down into those 5 properties at the bottom.
Mm.
Yeah, and also what Trevor said as well with the garden space at the back. I thought we have got I know it's a guidance what we have, but what is the guidance we're allowed to have?
The guidance is that for every square metre of footprint, there should be a square metre of amenity space.
Because I've done a bit of a calculation. On the size of the 5 properties, it says it's 22.92 meters from one end of the property to the other. The 5 properties, which roughly works about 4.5 meters per garden space from garden to garden, which only gives it 14.9 feet wide. And what they're supposed to give 21 or 18?
Yeah, I think I have to accept that the gardens are below our supplementary planning guidance requirements. I wouldn't argue that point. All I would say is, given that fact, do we feel that the size that we do have is small enough that we think that that's going to cause real harm to amenity for future occupiers. Are they so small that we think it's they're unacceptable?
And I think, in fairness, Stephen, you stated that right at the start of your presentation, did you not?
Yes, I did make that point in the presentation, yeah.
I think the other thing, if I may, as chair, they're providing affordable houses, which are obviously desperately needed, and I know that's not a planning consideration as such, but you know, there is an urgency for this type of development, I would suggest. Right, there's no one else indicating that they wish to speak, and perhaps in view of the last vote that we took, I better read or just repeat what the officer's recommendation is on this application. Officer's recommendation is that it be granted with conditions subject to a section 106 legal agreement with delegated powers to refuse permission should the agreement not be signed within 4 months of a resolution to grant permission. Is everybody clear on that?
Yeah.
Okay, could somebody make a recommendation, please?
Chair, can I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation?
Okay, it's been proposed that we accept the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Yeah,
Chair.
second, Chair.
Okay, that's been seconded, duly seconded. Okay, Neil, could you organise a vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rately, please.
Against?
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris.
For the proposal.
Councillor White.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Hollyoak.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
For.
Thank you. And yourself, please, Chair.
4.
Thank you. So that's 8 for and 1 against, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The officer's recommendation is carried. We then move on to the next item on your agenda, which is item 3, pages 37 to 46, application number 20-1174. The site is 5 Ponte Mason Rise, Rogerstone. The ward councillors are Chris Evans, Yvonne Forsey and Val Dudley. I've got a public speaker here. Neil, could you confirm if there is a public speaker?
Yes, it's Mr. Julian Knight, Chair.
Yeah, okay,
Applicant.
Julian Knight, public speaker. So if we move to the presenting officer, which is Stephen, we'll have to pay you overtime today, Stephen. Okay.
Okay. Okay. The application relates to the rear part of land, I suppose, between the garden, the former garden of number 5 Ponte Mason Rise and the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal corridor. So it relates to sort of this area here. The application seeks retrospective consent for the unauthorised enclosure of canal embankment, change of use to residential curtilage. It also includes or seeks consent for the erection of a timber boundary fence to enclose the land. The application has been reported to Planning Committee as part of the land is owned by the council. You notice from this plan, before I move on, that number 1 Ponte Mason Rise has previously extended the curtilage up to a similar point many years ago now. I don't know how long, but that's already happened in number 1. So what the applicant has done is increase the residential curtilage up to a similar extent there. So you see the block plan here. This is the extent of application site, and there's an elevation plan as well showing the embankment and a fence that's been erected. In terms of planning policies, this plan, the red line, is the extent of urban boundary. So you can see that the land in question is actually outside the urban boundary, just outside. So the land and the canal is actually designated as countryside for planning policy purposes. And it's also, the canal is also a site of importance for nature conservation. The canal is also a conservation area, and so the blue sort of indicates the line of the conservation area, and again you can see that the site falls within part of that conservation area there. It's also classed as environmental space according to our local development plan, and the footpath that runs along the canal is actually a public right of way. And that the dark green line there indicates that public right of way. This is a photograph that was submitted by the applicant, in fact, and just sort of indicates what the land used to look like, looking towards the canal. And this is a photograph sort of during construction works, I assume, where they were constructing the fence and undertaking excavation works. And that's from the garden. That's how it's looking in its finished look. So these are some contextual photographs of the canal. You can see that the canal has got a very much a sort of a tree line, sort of semi-rural character about it. And these are photographs of that property number 1, Pontomason Rise, which is the neighbour to the applicant. So you can see that it's become sort of heavily grown up to the footpath there. And this is how the fence for the applicant looks from the outside. You can see that it is being constructed very close to the footpath there. Just another vantage showing the timber boundary fence. So in terms of the assessment, we feel that the proposals suburbanise the canal corridor. The conservation officers objected. He states that the proposals fail to preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area because it's currently got that semi-rural character and it has that suburbanising effect to it. The public rights of way officer has also objected, stating that enclosing the landscaped embankment causes a reduction in the public enjoyment of the corridor. We've also received objections from the council's tree officer to the enclosure of protected trees. The trees are protected because they are within a conservation area, so they sort of benefit from that protection. But the tree officer is saying that, look, these trees are meant for public enjoyment, and whilst they've not been felled, it's a lost opportunity to sort of enjoy their appearance and to plant more trees on that ground. However, no tree survey has actually been submitted with the application to assess whether those groundworks have actually adversely affected the trees. We just don't have that information. The ecology officers expressed concern, given the fact that the canal corridor is a site for special scientific, a site of importance for nature conservation. And again, objecting really because there's just no information to assess what the impact on ecology has been. And we've also received an objection, which you can read from the Canals Trust, they've got various concerns on it as well. So in summary, we're recommending the Planning Commission be refused. The works, in our opinion, represent a harmful extension of residential curtilage into the countryside, has a suburbanising effect on the semi-rural character of the corridor, and insufficient information to assess impact on trees and ecology. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. The public speaker is Mr. Julian Knight. Mr. Knight, present.
Hello, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this time. I want to just put some context before I highlight what I think are 4 issues. We purchased the property in August 2005. We were involved with the developers from October 2004. So the information that Steve Williams was unable to provide you with, I can tell you. At that time, the area of our planning property was entirely the rear garden of a property called Stonycroft, which had been there since the 40s. And I provided photographs of evidence of the fact that that entire area was garden and the boundaries there too. And some of the photographs do show the boundary that existed prior to me purchasing that particular property. I apologise the fact that the fence has been constructed, and I regret that in all honesty. When I made my application in October, the fence hadn't been constructed. As a result of November winds, my fence damaged 7 posts and it required some activity. And based on my understanding of where we were at that time, I believed I had a reasonable position to gain planning consent. I do regret that now, and the anxiety and stress that's been caused. However, we are where we are, and I want us to seek some sort of resolution. That area has been part of Number One's garden since October 2005, 1 month after they moved in. All they did was take down the fence, and the original fence that was part of the garden was restored to be in the boundary. I merely seek to do a similar position, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So historically, it's always been the garden of a property called Stonycroft since 1940s, and the very edge of that pathway was where the posts were. When we constructed the fence, we actually used the holes into which the original fence had been used. We have not gained any additional land. That land has also been maintained by myself because it has not been maintained by the council or any other owning body, and I've had to clear it on several occasions, remove litter, food waste and dog walker parcels generously donated to that land, because I have a young family and I want to make sure that the number of rodents that occurred and we reported was kept to a minimum, and I've cleared that area. But I really want to highlight 4 key points. The historical use of the land as residential garden for Stonycroft. I have provided evidence of the use of that land subject to application, showing use of residential garden back to the 1940s. Photographs, maps, everything, right up to the point of my application. This is not therefore a request to take from the newly designated countryside, but to re-establish what had gone before. Precedence. Precedence was established in allowing Number One Ponty Mason Rise to return to the original footprint, moving the boundary to establish the original fence line in October 2005. This was further compounded by the fact that land registry amendments in February 2011, when the contentious area of Number One was removed from the conservation area designation. Failure to take action established precedents. The original allocation of land to the conservation area only took place as part of a compromise to allow an appeal to go forward for planning permission. Only Number One and Number 5 Ponty Mason previously had that residential garden use of land in the conservation area. Precedence does therefore not go beyond these 2 properties. In that respect, Number 1 and 5 are returning land to a garden, a rear residential garden, and not taking new land. The canal path from 14 Locks to Cumcarn has numerous examples of similar use of land. Boundary fences on the edge of the canal path, use of wooden fences in commonplace all along the conservation area, including the immediate proximity of Number One. Newport and Caerphilly local authorities have not been consistent in their determination and refusal, for me, would be inconsistent with the rest of the canal conservation area. I also believe Newport City Council have failed to provide appropriate advice and guidance in respect of the land designation information required. I regret moving my fence because in May 2020, I sought planning advice from the department by email. At that time, there was a failure to advise on the designation of the land and therefore success potential of the application. 9 days before this committee met, I was told that because I'd failed to produce an ecology report and a tree report, that the recommendation was going to be failure. I've never been formally asked to produce those reports. All I merely ask is that I be treated fairly and in line with the historical designation of this land up until 2005 as a garden of a residential property. I would ask that you allow established precedents to be applied to my application for this small section of garden and grant permission.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Knight. Thank you very much. Committee? Charles Ferris, Councillor Ferris, thank you.
I wonder, would it be possible for Mr. Knight to show us the maps and photographs he's referred to, please?
Chair, all the documents that you've been shown today by Mr. Williams are as a result of me sharing those photographs with the planning committee. I've showed a picture of Stonycroft in its original format. I've shown maps of Stonycroft, and I've shown pictures. In fact, the one picture that you saw when they were constructing the rear fence has the one big tree with the actual original fence immediately behind it, exactly the same way I've now constructed my fence. And again, I apologise that I've done it. I shouldn't have done it. I recognise that. However, that actually establishes exactly the same boundary that was part of Stonycroft property up until 2005.
Okay,
that's the original pictures of the property.
Councillor Ferris, if I could interject, please. So the protocol is Mr. Knight has had his time and used it to explain his case, which we've all understood and heard. You can't then cross-examine, you know that, and we can't go down that path, unfortunately. So committee members with questions, please, of the officer and the presentation. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Stephen, sort of what has just obviously been discussed about timescales, about not having the report, and the reports being part of, I suppose, the necessary evidence needed. Could we look at, again, it's only a thought of mine at the moment, sort of delaying this until those reports are available?
Okay. Perhaps if I can just clarify some of the points that the applicant is making. So he's referring to sort of the historical use of the land. What I perhaps need to explain is that what's before you today is a planning application. So a planning application is there to look at the merits of a proposal. It's not there to look at what the possible historical uses of the land were. The only time where the historical use of the land could be an issue is if we were to receive what's called a certificate of lawfulness. So a certificate of lawfulness is an application that seeks to prove that the land has been used as garden for 10 years or more. And if that could be proven, then irrespective of whether something's acceptable or not, from a plan application point of view, it would be a lawful use of the land. So those sort of issues that the applicant is raising in terms of the history of the site, those are matters that would be dealt with as part of any certificate of lawfulness application, should the applicant choose to submit that. They're not issues for us to consider today as part of the planning application. Really, all you can look at today are the material planning considerations, which I've run through in terms of the fact that it's countryside, the fact that it's conservation area, the issue of trees and ecology. Those are the material considerations. You can't look really consider this history of the land. In terms of the reason we didn't ask for ecology reports and tree reports, is that obviously there's substantial cost to the applicant to produce those sorts of reports. They're not something that he could produce himself. He would have to appoint consultants. And we don't, if we are minded to refuse an application in any case, on other grounds, and in this case we were, because of the impact, the visual impact on the canal, we don't see that it's reasonable to put the applicant to that additional expense and then simply receive a refusal from us. And it's also complicated by the fact that obviously the works to some extent have been completed. So it's very difficult now to assess what sort of ecological impact there was. It's been done. Clearly the tree report may provide some information on how the tree roots of those remaining trees are faring. So there may be value in that. But I think the main reason we didn't ask for those reports is that we were minded to refuse the application in any case.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
I mean, it's useful to know that you won't mislead the public, so to speak, on planning matters, and you won't incur their cost without good reason. Councillor Clark?
That was my question, Chair.
Sorry?
That was my question. Stephen's answered it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor William Roudley?
Thank you, Chair. The majority of the question has been answered by the officer concerned. It would appear that the applicant has submitted the wrong application, and that there probably is merit in if he had gone for a certificate of lawfulness. I have to take the advice that I've been given by the officer that the historical value and evidence plays no part in the decision that's being sought after today. I think that the wrong application has been made, and I don't know where the applicant stands now, but I would have liked to have seen all the evidence, because my initial thought of this was it possibly a land grab? Although I have to deal with what I have in front of me. So unfortunately, I can't see any other way out of this at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roudley. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. I understand in regards to the application and the officer's refusal of it. If we comply with the officer's request to refuse this application, where does the applicant stand in regards to applying for a certificate of lawfulness? Does that prevent him from applying or not?
No, it'd say he'd have a number of options open to him. He could appeal against the decision and see what the planning inspectorate make of it. Or he could choose to submit a certificate of lawfulness to deal with this sort of historical side of it, and we would entertain that. We would allow that application to run its course and to be properly assessed before reaching the point where we would consider formal enforcement action. So we would allow the applicant to sort of to submit that information for us to properly consider.
Okay, would Newport City Council refuse the certificate of lawfulness, and would, not if, but say they did, would the applicant have the right to appeal against that?
Yes, there's a right of appeal on certificate of lawfulness applications as well, yes.
Okay, I just got one comment. I'm a bit disappointed we don't have a map of Pontymason Rogerstone from 1886, which I believe that is available, and that would show the curtilage of the properties along there. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, I haven't provided that on purpose because I don't think it's relevant to today's decision.
Right. Okay, I'm disappointed in that. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for those interesting questions, Councillor Watkins. Councillor William Routley is indicating again.
Thank you for letting me back in, Chair. In the light of what has just been spoken by the officer, it's a legal question. So could we not delay the decision on this until after a certificate of lawfulness has been presented?
No, I don't think that would be reasonable, because I don't think that the decision on the certificate of lawfulness has any bearing on this application. The certificate of lawfulness would be purely a matter to sort of legally decide whether a use is lawful. What's before you today is to consider whether the proposal is acceptable in planning terms. So they're two entirely different questions, and I don't see why a certificate of lawfulness submission should delay the planning application decision.
Okay, Chair, can I just further come back? That's an opinion rather than a legal definition. So could we have the legal definition? Is it possible for us as a committee to have this delayed until a certificate of lawfulness certificate has been presented and deemed upon? Then if that was granted, obviously then the planning application would fall. But is it possible for us to do it? Legally possible?
Chair, should I comment?
Yes, legal.
As Steve has said, a certificate of lawfulness is a totally separate application, looking at different things. And really we have to proceed with today's application on the merits of, on its own merits, and looking at the material considerations of that Steve has outlined in the report. So, you know, the LDC would be something separate.
Okay, I think you've clarified that. Councillor Routley, you may be trying to be helpful to the process, but we might complicate it even more.
Yes, it probably would complicate it, and the solicitor has given her view.
Yeah.
Accept.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Tracy Olioke.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, really, we know there's a boundary next door, and we have no idea when that was in place. And I'm just wondering, you know, why is that legal above this one? And what are the differences? Is it just because this has been erected recently? I just want to check about the legal implications about that boundary always being used as garden. I'm struggling to understand if that has always been a boundary of a garden, you know, how it's come that all of a sudden it's not, and the boundary actually stands at a certain area. You know, if we go back historically since 1806, you know, I'm just trying to find out, when was this new boundary you know, when was it initiated then that the new boundary actually, even though the cottage had that garden from 1806, that since a certain date it actually hasn't? I'm trying to establish then the timeline for one, it always be in a garden, to not be in a garden, if that's okay, Chair. Both legally and obviously professionally through Stephen planning.
Yeah. Complicated question, but Stephen?
Okay. Let's say I'm nervous about getting too involved in these sorts of questions because, as I say, it's not really something that is part of the consideration of the planning application. But I will try to answer the question. So obviously this is something that we will investigate if the applicant submits certificate of lawfulness. But my understanding is that before these houses were built, and I don't know when they were built, maybe in the 1980s, I don't know, 90s perhaps, this was far more rural. And I think there was some sort of property here called Stony Croft, which has been demolished, and then a developer has come in and built these houses. And clearly we would have to see if we've got any information on the extent of gardens that were permitted as part of that scheme, because that would supersede anything that any rights that Stony Croft had. Stony Croft is long gone, so we'd look to see what the approved plans for that development were. In terms of when the garden of number 1 Pontymason Rise was extended up to the footpath, I simply don't know when that was done. The critical thing for planning on improving a certificate of lawfulness is that it needed to have happened 10 years or more for it to be lawful. And whether that was done more than 10 years ago, I simply don't know. And I think we will have to open an enforcement case to sort of investigate that. To be fair to this property, I think we'd have to investigate that as well. In terms of when these works were carried out, well, my understanding is relatively recently, last year. I think our Newport North became aware of it last year. Exactly when, I don't know, but I think this work was, well, I don't know when it's done, and I'm not going to surmise. That's for the applicant to submit information for us to assess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee, I think we can only legally consider what's before us today, and what's before us today is a proposal to retention of change of use of land to residential curtilage and erection of means of enclosure affecting public rights of way. That's what's before you today. Certificate of lawfulness has been mentioned, but that's not as part of the application. And the recommendation of the officers is that we refuse the application before you today. I think the applicant now understands other aspects of a possible way forward, but we're not here today to advise on that or consider that. Jason Jordan, Councillor Jordan, you wish to speak?
Yeah, sorry, Jay. Yeah, just going back as we were all talking, I've been doing a little bit of digging actually, and I've gone back to 2003, actually, where the first application was actually made on Stony Croft, and it was a residential development outline that was as well back in 2003. So there's something to look back at for the officers to have a look at, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else? Committee prepared to make a recommendation, please? Anyone?
Yes, Chair. It's Councillor Clark. I'll go with vote for the officer's recommendation.
Okay, it's been proposed that we accept the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Neil, can you organise a vote on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rately, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Farris.
Done it again. 4.
Thank you. Councillor White.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Clark. Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hollyoak.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
4.
And yourself, please, Chair.
4.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. That concludes the planning applications before you today. The committee, there's a item 4, the publication of Future Wales and National Plan 2040, and we need an update from the name? Lindsay Christian. So Lindsay, are you, there you are.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Last committee I put forward a very similar report. Future Wales was adopted on the 24th of February. So that's the National Development Plan for Wales. So we now take all development decisions, planning decisions in line with Future Wales. Unfortunately, I missed an application which should have come to you last time. So this is just completing the list. So it's application 19/1231 for 27 Pennyland Close. Is the construction of a detached dwelling and associated parking, which was resubmission of a previous application. It came to committee on the 6th of May 2020. So my role since the adoption of Future Wales was just to go back through these applications which were permitted subject to a legal agreement and just make sure there was nothing else to take into account with the adoption of the National Development Plan. With this, a review of this permission, we concluded that the scale and type of development is at a local level, so there's nothing new policy-wise from the National Plan that we would suggest would change our previous recommendation for approval subject to section 106. So our recommendation remains the same, and yeah, that's the full report really. So the recommendation is there for committee. Thank you.
Okay, Christine, thank you very much. Does it mean that we need to note this, or do we vote on it?
I can't remember what we did last month.
Okay, I'm just being advised that we need to vote to agree with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, and for the record, it's application reference 19-1231, and the site is 27 Pennyland Close. So Neil, could you organise a vote on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rately, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris. Sorry, Councillor Ferris, please. I come back to Councillor Ferris. Councillor White.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Hollyoak.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
4.
Thank you.
Charles Ferris has got his mic turned off, I think, or he's turned it on.
I'm sorry about that. Couldn't get the thing to go. I'm for it. Okay. Right.
Thank you. And yourself, please, Chair.
Yeah, I'm for.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Okay, so I think that concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you for your...
I got a question, please, if I may, for Tracy Brooks or somebody that can tell us about update for Uskmouth Power Station. Do we have any information on that?
Good question.
Hi, Chair. Yes, the Welsh Government have called that application in. I think I sent an email around to everybody to confirm that that application is now with Welsh Government and the ministers to determine. So we won't play any further part in the determination of that application.
No, I was just interested to know what their determination is going to be, though, if that decision has been made.
It hasn't been made yet, so
No.
obviously with the Welsh Government elections will affect the Minister being able to make a decision on that. But that shouldn't stop the Planning Inspectorate officers from progressing their recommendation to the Minister. So I think realistically we're not going to be getting any decision on that until after June.
Okay, could that information be passed to the Planning Committee when it does come, please, Tracy?
Of course, yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. But for the record, we were informed of that situation by the Planning Department via email, weren't we? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, we were.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. If there's nothing else, thank you all for attending. Thank you for your time, and see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Bye all. Thank you.